Good afternoon and welcome everyone. I'm Jack Van Horn from the University of Virginia, and it is my distinct pleasure to welcome you to this opening session of our 2024-2025 Foundations of Biomedical Data Science Seminar Series. This unique lecture series is made possible through the generous support of the Integrated Translational Health Institute of Virginia, the University of Virginia's College of Arts and Sciences, the School of Data Science, and through a grant from the National Institutes of General Medical Sciences. Since its founding in 2016, the Foundations of Biomedical Data Science Seminar Series has been at the forefront of exploring the transformative impact of data science methodologies, artificial intelligence, deep learning, and statistical modeling across the diverse themes in biomedicine and health sciences. Our selected theme for this year is focused on quantitative approaches in spatial multi-omics for guiding personalized medicine, where each week we'll enjoy presentations on Fridays from a wide range of leading thinkers about the issues, promise, opportunities, and hurdles associated with advanced genomic, transcriptomic, metabolomic, and other omic methods, along with the wide variety of data analytic opportunities they present in data science, deep learning, AI, and spatial modeling. Very soon, in fact, we will be publicly announcing that our 2024-2025 application cycle for our Biomedical Data Science Innovation Lab is open, and we hope that you might be able to help us in encouraging your junior faculty members working in various areas of omics and related biology, as well as clinical medicine and statistics, to be our applicants. We're very excited about engaging with our new community of BDSIL participants and bringing together omics data collectors and computational scientists to explore ways to map the spatial characteristics of multi-omics data. Participants selected for our special Biomedical Data Science Innovation Lab program will utilize the content from seminars like the one we're going to see today and throughout the year as essential material for our culminating in-person manuscript and grant project development workshop, which will be held this year at the Hutton Hotel in downtown Nashville, Tennessee in June of 2025. In future seminars, we will be providing the details on how interested junior faculty and US-based institutions can apply to this program here very, very soon. We're very excited about this. But before we dive into lectures about the fundamentals of spatial multi-omics, we felt it was important to provide an overview of the value of the Biomedical Data Science Innovation Lab itself for one's career path development, for expanding one's collaborative network, and for promoting team science-based efforts at the intersection of biomedicine and data science. And with this in mind, the title of today's seminar is BDSIL Building a Career Path on Collaboration, a panel discussion. Through this panel, hosted by myself, we aim to highlight the experiences of our past BDSIL participants, hear directly from them on how the program has impacted their collaborative research activities, and help them as they navigate their careers. We will reflect on the skills, knowledge, and perspectives they've gained through their particular year that they were with us for their BDSIL experience. And hopefully they also had a lot of fun, and hopefully they'll be able to tell us about that too. Our panelists today are Yang Chen, who's an assistant professor in the Department of Statistics at the University of Michigan, and a research assistant professor at the Michigan Institute for Data and AI in Society, where she studies statistical methodology and computational algorithms in health, astronomy, and space, as well as in climate sciences. And Dr. Arjun Durganji, who is an assistant professor of ophthalmology and glaucoma, and the Glaucoma Fellowship Director here at the University of Virginia School of Medicine, where he specializes in glaucoma, international ophthalmology, and minimally invasive glaucoma surgery. We also have Dr. Susan Fenton, who is the Doris L. Ross Professor and Vice Dean of Education at the UT Health Houston McWilliams School of Biomedical Informatics, where she manages all of their certificate, master's, and doctoral programs. And finally, Dr. Catherine Thompson, who is an Associate Professor of Statistics at the University of Kentucky, who applies data science methodologies to biologically relevant topics in statistical genetics and bioinformatics. As always, we are streaming this panel lecture live and for recording via YouTube. So if you're watching us out on YouTube, thank you so much for joining us. And with that, welcome to all of our panelists. Oh, and here they are. I should have hit the space bar here. Here they all are. And here they all are on our screen. So I will stop sharing this so everyone can see. And welcome, everybody. We're super excited about being able to have you here. Hey everybody, I just wanted to give everybody a chance to just maybe say a little bit about when they came to the BDSIL, what you've been doing now, and what your thoughts are for a variety of different aspects of the BDSIL that you thought were relevant. But just to get us started, maybe we could ask you to give a one breath introduction to yourself, anything I may have missed, and what year you came, and what the theme was, what project you worked on. Let's start with Yang. Yang, can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, my name is Yang Chen. I'm in statistics. I work on Bayesian modeling and computation with different kinds of application areas. I joined this event in 2018 when I was a fresh assistant professor at Michigan and hoping to explore different application fields. And at the end, I taught Bayesian statistics to many scientists, and later we collaborated on multiple projects on Bayesian statistics.
That's awesome. And Arjun, you're a two-time attendee. Tell us about that.
That's right. Yeah. So yeah, I think you did a great introduction, Jack. I mean, I don't know that there really add much there. But in addition to being a clinician, so I'm primarily a clinician. I'm a surgeon, and this potentially blinding condition called glaucoma. I'm an ophthalmologist. But I also am a big nerd, and I have a background in public health. And so I have really benefited from kind of meeting people in parallel fields to tackle big problems. And so I went not once but twice to what I called nerd camp, which is BDSIL, and had a blast. So clearly I had a blast, and then I came back for more. So yeah,
Thank you.
that's
And
it.
Susan, you joined us last year. And what was your experience like?
I did. So I had a wonderful experience. Actually, where I'm at in my career, a lot of times I don't get included in these things, but I figured I would apply, and it was because you had AI and teaching in the title. And so, and that's what I do is I teach. One of my big passions is workforce development, not just for people who are in our degree programs, but I've been helping our university on how we train our entire existing workforce with especially the emergence of the generative AI. And so I loved it. I had a great time. I learned a lot. I made some new friends. We are working on a project that we haven't gotten published yet. I don't think there's any funding out there for the particular project that I'm working on, but nevertheless, it was really beneficial for me. And I'm out there now, Jack, just so you know, all of our junior faculty, I'm like, you really need to go to this. You really need to go. So
That's what we like to hear, Susan. That's what we like to hear. Catherine, tell us about your experience.
Yes, I definitely appreciate the opportunity. I was fairly early in my career when I attended this program, so it was actually 2017, and I was pretty new to collaborative statistics and collaboration in general. So I was definitely learning along the way. And it was one of those things where to be in such an immersive, collaborative environment so early in my career with so many brilliant scientists is just an experience that can't be replaced, and definitely appreciate that. At this point, I now direct our collaborative statistics hub within the statistics department. And then I also lead the artificial intelligence and machine learning hub for University of Kentucky, which is across multiple colleges. And so all of that experience has fed into leading and developing as I'm working on those settings as well. So definitely appreciate the opportunity and can't recommend it enough.
Oh, thank you, Catherine. Catherine, while I have you, maybe you could describe what were your initial feelings, if you can think back to when you were applying to this. What did you think you were signing up for? And did it meet your expectations?
The first word that came to mind was uncertainty, which is pretty on par with a statistician. So I knew it was an opportunity to meet a lot of people from a lot of different fields. And I have always been really strongly interested in collaborations because the big problems take lots of minds and lots of perspectives. I don't know that I really knew what to expect before I came. I think that the camp idea is sort of what I look back and think about. yeah, I didn't really know what to expect. I sort of just showed up ready to go and ready to take instruction. And I know that the way that program was run, there was a very intentional component of building collaborations along with developing projects. And so there was a lot of focus on actually taking us from where we were, which for me was sort of a pretty new statistician, into working with a group in a very productive way on projects.
Yang, what was your initial impression when you were applying for our effort? And what did you think that was satisfied when you came? Did you, was there things that stood out for you particularly?
So when I was applying to this, I was just about to be independent as an independent researcher doing collaborative work. Previously, I was kind of guarded by my advisor and working in the backstage. So I was hoping to get to the firsthand opportunity to be learning about communication and collaboration in a guided fashion through this workshop. And it actually kind of surprised me in a good way. Especially when they kind of, at some point, they kind of push you to be networking with new people, do not be shy around, and just introduce yourself, introduce your research, and then do elevator pitches. So all of those kind of activities was very striking for me, but also trained me in a good way.
That's fantastic. Arjun, you like didn't learn enough the first time that you came back for a second time. So I'm kind of curious, how did your expectation that when you were applying for the first time, how did that influence your decision to do it again?
Sure. I mean, so in addition to my role, on faculty at the School of Medicine, I also lead a small medical device startup. And so the topic the first time in 22 was ethical issues in biomedical data science and AI, something like that. And so in my field in glaucoma, I have a little bit of a broader perspective, coming out of a public health background. So I developed this camera system that digitally augments common instruments that we used when we look at the back of the eye. And what my long-term vision to do with that, there's some some short-term sort of commercial interest and that sort of thing, but longer term, how can we use that to have better quality exams to pick up diseases like glaucoma more effectively, but do that in an ethical way? There have been some high-profile failures of AI, specifically in my field, with Google deep learning approaches and that sort of thing. And then getting into understanding, why did those things fail, and then what do we need, in terms of methods, and then also approaches to do this in an ethical way, but also just in a feasible way, to use the kind of data that my system generates, for example. And so that's something that is a very long-term kind of goal in terms of getting clinical tools that I could use as an ophthalmologist and my colleagues can to have better patient care. But how do we go about that in a feasible but also in an ethical way? And so that really spoke to me. And but I knew it would take a lot of people outside of my wheelhouse to meet. And that's exactly what happened. And basically, I met, it's like speed dating. Basically, you show up, it's a design thinking workshop, very, very high energy, people with very positive energy. And you're basically forming these ad hoc teams working on, a whole bunch of different ideas, big ideas, Wigby's, wouldn't it be great if scenarios. And then you get, so you'll get subject matter experts in lots of different areas, you'll get clinicians. Every year it's a different mix of people. And so in that year it was, computer scientists, bioethicists, and so on and so forth. And in order to tackle a big problem like that, you really do need those different kinds of groups. But the nice thing is that out of the course of the week, towards that, you kind of figure out, who you work well with, and like what sort of ideas sort of gel. And then eventually you'll form, a team around a core idea that might actually be able to proceed, kind of with a view of getting funded, for example, as an NIH research project. And so the goal is to generate like an R01 or an R21 mini proposal at the end of that time. And that's one of those things that we all get busy. And I mean, I'm an academic and I'm spread super thin, I'll be honest with you. So I'm not great at answering emails and that sort of thing. But we get within our little silo and we get busy. And so in order, things that actually we probably, if we put our minds to it, we could probably knock out fairly quickly. It's a lot easier when everybody's in one place. You've got that kind of, environment where this is like your camp project to do and knock this out, in a couple of days. It's really, really helpful. And it's also useful to not have to reinvent the wheel because you've got subject matter experts, in computer science or public health or whatever it is, in terms of figuring out, what are some of the methods, what are some of the caveats that we'll have to watch out for. And so we can come up with a really strong, first draft, get past that blank page problem really quickly. And so that's something that's led to other things. So I actually have a group of master's students from the School of Data Science. Now we're working on that problem now, 2 years later, we're working on basically generating finally, it took me a while to find people of like, how do we use like multiple video frames as opposed to, having to, heavily annotate, one frame at a time because my camera generates video frames. But we're working on that problem, right now. But in order to do that, I had to meet these people and then form those connections, and have it, in an organic way. And then,
I think that's great.
yeah. And then for the second round, basically it was a different topic and it was COVID. Is basically what's the impact of COVID, on, different areas. And most of the people who were attending were focusing on things like infectious disease modeling and so on and so forth, epidemiologists, and whereas my interest was as a clinician, I manage this chronic disease of the eye. And so I was really interested on what are the impacts on chronic disease management, and specifically around risk of bad outcome, for this huge exogenous shock to the system, that happened during the pandemic. And so that was kind of, and using glaucoma as sort of a test bed. And out of that met, data scientists, public health folks, a bunch of different, methods people. And the fascinating thing to me was that, for me, I had to get outside of my wheelhouse, but there are so many people who have these amazing methods that they've learned how to do, but they're looking for somebody with some passion to drive it towards, like a specific problem. And so I didn't realize that, but it's actually often useful for them to find like a clinical subject matter expert. And that's kind of the role that I've sort of come into on a couple of different projects now since then.
That's fantastic. That's exactly what we hope will happen, right? That people will find folks with the skill sets that they need in order to move an idea forward, or that somebody will have a clever method. It's like, oh, this is exactly what I need. And you'll start to have these conversations. And Susan, you're an educator, you're a, part of the administration for your particular school at UT Houston. And I'm just kind of curious from your perspective, what did you feel that the process, what you kind of went through with the BDSIL experience, how you go over multiple days and how you're interacting and mixing and matching, what did you feel about that process?
I actually loved that process. I got to, so forcing us to think outside of the box, where we're separate. How can I say this? So much of the time you're being pulled in multiple directions. And when we came there, it was kind of like we were cocooned. And but in a good way, right? Not in a bad way, because again, so often you're being pulled in multiple directions. You don't ever get to spend an entire week working on anything.
Well,
an entire day is a luxury. So having that entire week and going through all of the different steps to answer the questions, to get to meet people, to listen to them. I learned a lot about processes that I would like to use. So,
Catherine, was that your experience as well?
Yes, it was. I remember, being relatively scared of being in a room with lots of expertise in the beginning. And I think that because everything was set up so intentionally and there was so much mix and match, that it took that fear away just kind of naturally. And so it just became, yep, this is what we do now. Like we talk to new people in new areas and we get feedback on our ideas, and then we provide feedback to our colleagues, and it ended up being a pretty natural process. And I think, if there's one thing to carry with us through the collaborative world, I think not being so afraid when we show up to a meeting, and really embracing the knowledge that everyone around us has and building off of that is really helpful. And so I definitely remember that part being particularly different from anything else I had experienced up until that point in academics, but also incredibly helpful.
Yang, one of the things I think both Catherine and Susan touched on this as well is just the ability to interact with other people. And part of that is just something that we feel very strongly here at BDSIL headquarters about team science and bringing people together who have just these different experiences. They're working in statistics and they never really talk to people who are working in clinical medicine, or they don't usually talk to people with computer science skills, for example. But that's the walls we're trying to break down. Was that your experience, and how did you feel about that? And has that affected you at all?
Yeah, it did. So I was extremely nervous when I first got started because statisticians is not definitely not the majority. It's like a very minority in the group. And when people like within the same group, you have 5 people, all of the 4 of them can understand each other. I was kind of staring at them and trying to follow, but it's really hard. But later I kind of because there are many opportunities for us to have small talks, and gradually I can pick up their conversations and they kind of know my level of understanding and use the language that is more approachable to me. So kind of both parties improve, and then that dynamic gets better and better, that we can definitely communicate more complex concepts with each other instead of having those baby talks about this is exactly what we're doing. And it kind of impacted me in the longer term, because after that particular workshop, I started many other conversations with my colleagues locally at Michigan, trying to establish different kinds of collaborations. And I kind of know how to cross this language barrier. It's not like English as a second language, but it's more about discipline language, how we actually understand each other better, what kind of statistical terms that I can use, and what kind of how I can explain my statistical concepts to people so that scientists can understand, and vice versa. I know how to ask the right questions so that they will explain to me to the extent where I can understand.
Arjun, can you comment on that notion of the different languages that people speak in science, and maybe a little bit about how we try and, like, at least we recognize that that's there and we take steps to try and break down that barrier?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I think everybody's talked about, how we get in our little bubbles and silos and that sort of thing. And sometimes we might interact with each other and kind of as a consultant, but again, these are sort of one-off engagements or very much more kind of at arm's length. Whereas I think this workshop in particular does such an intentional job of doing ice-breaking type activities and getting outside of your comfort zone and forcing somebody to actually speak the other person's language, because we're having to make these collaborative pitches and take very complex ideas and distill them down into, these, sometimes uncomfortably short presentations and pitches. And because it's good practice for then coming up with you've got that very uncomfortable task of taking this big idea, big project, and distilling it down to the 1-page specific aims page, or that sort of thing. So, getting the clinician to be able to talk a little bit about the public health person's methods, or vice versa. So you'll get practice doing that again and again, and as you sit down and hash out, what your presentation might be, for example, or your mini proposal, everybody will have, a chance to basically say, oh, does this make sense? Does it not make sense? Should that be in here? Should that not be? Should we do something different? But you're sitting at one table doing that actively together.
Catherine, I think it's really interesting because I think when you get statisticians or computational folks together and you're talking with clinicians, very often, a clinician or a bioscientist will say something like, "Oh, the such and such was upregulated or downregulated." And I always kind of think that statisticians must hate that, right? What does that mean? Is it significantly up? Is there a difference there? Is it, how do you measure that? What's that really mean? At the same time, a clinician says, wait, what's an eigenvalue? And you just have these like different terms. They're, possibly different languages, but then you have something like a vector, right? Well, a vector in clinical medicine is a very different thing from a vector in mathematics, and yet we're using the same term. Do you have any experiences like yourself in that, where that's happened, and any experiences at the BDSIL where maybe that presented itself?
Oh man, that's a good question. Absolutely. In projects, I have those experiences actually quite a lot, and particularly with new collaborators. In BDSIL, I'm sure it happened as well. And I think, there's a piece about, I love what Yang said about it kind of being a second language, but we do sort of come in with our own languages, and then there's this translation piece. And I think being really clear and really clear and really honest with questions, particularly in the first couple of collaborative meetings, can be really helpful so that you're both adjusting your meters, right? So if I'm working with a clinician, they may not know what an eigenvalue is or what a vector is, but the flip side of that is, I don't know, upregulated, downregulated, this gene versus that gene. To me, they're just two genes. And so, recognizing the value that everyone brings is super helpful. And asking those questions in the beginning really points out the advantages of team science. At BDSIL is often, one statistician, maybe two statisticians in a group. So there was a lot of, what do you mean by better? Or when you said improved, who's improving? Is it a leg? Is it an arm? I don't know. And so, we often kind of laugh about those things as they happen. And I think that's a good way to have productive conversations on those fronts. But the reality is, the more we understand about each other's context, even though I'm never going to be a subject matter expert in glaucoma. That's just not on my bingo card, and that is fine. But at least having some understanding of what's going on makes the results of the science better and more applicable. And so trying to really lean into those things in the beginning has been really helpful with new collaborators and new projects, especially.
Susan, one of the things that we do, and you are all the beneficiaries of this, is when we are looking at the application materials from people, is we're really looking for those people who are interested in collaborative science, interested in team science, interested in growing their research network, and hopefully, doing this team building. As an educator and somebody who's deeply involved in, everything from certificate programs to doctoral programs, are you seeing that as being something that is being kind of observed, recognized, and does like the BDSIL, does it help in that regard, from how education is happening now?
So I think it does. I think, is it being recognized? Is it being emphasized? It depends on where you go. Unfortunately, it depends on the culture of the organization. It's something that we try to do a lot. So School of Biomedical Informatics, right? It doesn't become much more narrow than that in terms of schools, right? Like it would be like having a school of ophthalmology. It doesn't matter if it's the rest of medicine. We got our School of Ophthalmology. So what we try to do, especially for our doctoral students, is when they're doing their dissertations or their translational practice projects, ensure they have their advisors complement each other. And if they're doing something that has a specific clinical context, we essentially make them get somebody from our School of Medicine to help them have that true expertise on their team. What what I try to do with the students is talking about it's okay not to know something. It's really okay not to know something and to ask the questions, because that's the only way you learn. So no one can know everything. There's just too much. No one can know everything. And so it's really good to ask questions when you go in. If somebody says something and you don't understand what it means, ask them. And to acknowledge what you know, what your expertise is, and when other expertise is going to help you with that. So yeah, I think that the whole team science, there's just too much out there. I don't know if we'll ever have a true Renaissance person again. And not because we don't have wildly brilliant people. It's because there's just too much today. So
I think
yeah.
you're absolutely right. There's just so much. And, even if you try in one field, in some cases, it may take you 2 years just to get up to the, current state of the art of what's being done. And in order to kind of help pull you up by your bootstraps, you need to find research partners. And,
Well, and
where
Jack,
are you going to do that? Right.
by the time you learn the current state of the art, it will have moved. Like
Yeah.
if
Yeah.
the day I started, right, it's growing so fast, right? I've heard some people talk recently and they're like, oh, today is the slowest it's ever going to be. And I'm like, okay, maybe take me out back and shoot me because it's so hard to keep up.
Well, and Yang, as somebody who is junior faculty, and you're probably still pre-tenure and you're working on all these things, do you find that yourself? And do you have to, do you count on collaboration? Do you count on finding your people who are able to help you? Do you count on that to be able to do the kind of work that you do?
I for statistics, it's like a very interdisciplinary in the sense that we're the full developers, and you want to be developing the tools that people will actually use at the end of the day instead of only of mathematical interest. So I do count on collaborators in order to come up with the right statistical problems to work on instead of an imaginary mathematics problem for me. So that is why I've been quite engaged with starting from the very, very early stage of my career with scientists of different kinds of domains. Biomedical science is one of those domains, and I also put a lot of efforts into physical science domains. And they do share a lot of surprisingly similar problems. For example, high-dimensional imaging data processing, dimensionality reduction, feature engineering, and prediction models, for example.
Arjun, you kind of gave some examples of how you're working with faculty, people who participated in our BDSIL already, on doing some collaborative work with some of your ophthalmological data. Can you tell us a little bit more about like that collaboration and what people are contributing?
Sure. And there's multiple ways that that's come about, and a lot of it again is that sort of there's speed dating, but regardless, there's these organic relationships that form, and so from the second from the second meeting workshop that I went to, that was the one outside of Seattle. There ended up being 2 or 3 people who I've continued to collaborate with, and then actually one on funded projects. And I was really happy to be able to bring in some funding to be able to help, support, Professor Shakari. So, for example, Haman was like very quiet, but he sort of came over. He's like, okay, I'm kind of interested in your project and stuff. And then it turns out that he's like this dark horse. He was rocked the house. He just came up with these amazing methods. And then, there's that 1 week where you're all, at nerd camp together, but then afterwards he kept on and like, okay, well, yeah, let's meet up again. And it turned out that, we'd come up, there's a couple of different NIH R21 opportunities. There's a NOFO that was, similar to the project that we were working on. And so I separately, I work on some telemedicine projects. I lead a 29-site vision public health program with screening for something called diabetic retinopathy in Virginia. And kind of alongside of that, I also lead this large bioinformatics database called Source. at UVA, which pulls in data from EPIC, the electronic health record system. And so out of that, we got some funding from the CDC to look at vision loss in Appalachian rural southwestern Virginia, to kind of examine this question from self-reported surveys, like, is this real or is this not, in terms of this signal, is that real or not? And it turned out that, and so that there's some funding, to do that. And it turned out that to tackle that problem using electronic health record data, we had data that was supposed to be structured, but it really wasn't. It was very messy. And, are there some tools that we can use to be able to clean this up without an army of medical students or whatever? And so basically, Professor Shakari, it turned out, so we had some funding for his PhD student, and basically came up with what I call UVA GPT. Basically, he used basically large language model to sort of structure this semi-structured data out of the electronic health record, looking at visual acuity data, which was really cool. And then we have a paper that we're putting together right now. The manuscript we're in revisions right now. And there was some funding that came out of that. And then out of that project, methods, and then pulling this this database into shape, that then led to other collaborations, including in transcriptomics. So basically, I have a surgical study which I had led for 3 years of collecting this tissue out of the eye that's responsible for high eye pressure in people with glaucoma. And but we knew we wanted to be able to correlate clinical data, and so that led to collaborators like Javi Rosero and whatnot, who and Chelsea Marie, who had been there, also another person in another team, also at UVA, working in a different domain. But it turned out that she'd worked with a lot with transcriptomic data. And so she sat me down like, okay, this is what PCA is, and this is, how you can make sense of, these reports and that sort of thing. So, there's collaborations that have happened informally, and then there's actually collaborations that have turned into like funded projects and things like that as well over the years.
Catherine, tell us about what the outcomes from your group were. Did you guys were you able to produce a paper, or were you able to get a little bit of funding? What happened?
Yeah, so we were close, but it's sort of one of those things where you get busy. So our group was focusing on trying to identify biomarkers that would be early detection opportunities for people with skin infections. So I teamed up with a dermatologist and another statistician. And so we worked on that problem for a bit. The other thing that came out of BDSIL is the other statistician, Lisa Braber, is at Pacific Northwest National Labs. So we invited her to come to Kentucky, and she did some research here with us for a little while as a visitor, and then has also just been a great connection into national labs as we're mentoring our students who are trying to figure out what career direction to go. That's sort of a opportunity that our students don't hear too much about, so have kept in contact with her over the years.
That's great. And Susan, you were sort of telling us when we were chit-chatting before that you have a thing that you were doing at our most recent BDSIL when we were in San Diego. Can you tell us a little bit about that and what that's turned into for you?
Sure. So I partnered with Felix, and we were a group of 2, and really focused on a framework for healthcare organizations to utilize as they're attempting to implement AI in healthcare. And AI has been around for a long time in healthcare, especially in terms of clinical decision support. But the generative AI is sort of a whole new beast. And what are the things that they need to take into consideration? So developing that framework. I was telling you, I have a student who's going to do a project with me in the spring on that. I will also say that there have been sort of aligned evolutions. So I am now a member of our university's AI Advisory Council, which was unexpected. I started following this. I started talking to people, and they were like, "Hey, come do this." And I was like, "Okay." We now have, because I said, you know, if you haven't noticed yet, AI is going to change everything in teaching. It just is. It's the generative AI is changing everything in teaching. It's changing how you teach. It's changing what you look at. It's changing what the students do. And so we now have our university has a work group on AI in teaching and learning that I'm chairing. And then I'm working with our IT department who helps make a lot of the AI happen, and our university-wide human resources for how we roll out training across the university for sort of raising all the boats, right? Raising the tide, raising all the boats, training all the faculty, training all the staff so that our university can make the most of this new technology. So it's had a lot of different impacts in different ways.
Well, Susan, we're really glad that the BDSIL, by participating, it's really improved your career trajectory. You're being asked to take all these leadership roles on. This is very exciting. I'm very happy about that. Catherine, what did you see any? I mean, you're mentioned that you're leading this tons of activities there at Kentucky, and this is branching out all over the place. Did anything that you learned at the BDSIL, did that help you in any way as you've taken on these new roles in your job?
Yes, absolutely. So, seeing an environment where everybody comes in, no one knows each other, or very few people know each other, and then all of these collaborative projects and groups get built sort of from the ground up was really helpful. I think in my own professional development, just being in an environment where the idea is that all of us together are better than just having one of us on our own, and having other people sort of say like, yes, we need your opinion because you are the statistician, instead of sort of the mindset that sometimes we go in with of, I'm the statistician, I don't know anything about this. And so having an opportunity to sort of flip that script a little bit has been incredibly helpful. Actually, flip that script entirely has been really helpful. And I think also getting used to being in lots of meetings where, as a statistician, we come in knowing nothing about the subject, and just being okay with that and not worrying about that on top of making sure that the meeting is productive. And so, that sort of skill set and building on that side has been definitely part of what we're doing in both the AI/ML hub as well as the collaborative statistics hub. We train a lot of graduate students from statistics in our department hub, and so taking those same lessons and trying to carry those on for our graduate students as well.
Yang, did you feel that there were activities that we went through during your time with the BDSIL that you felt were helpful to, and you've maybe say taken some of those and brought them into your lab or with your collaborators?
Yeah, definitely the communications. And one thing that I kind of summarized and realized after several days at the BDSI was that one effective way of cross language and cross discipline communication is that every time after they explain some scientific concept with me, I explain the same concept back with my mathematical notations and my statistical language. One thing is to confirm that I understand every single detail correctly, and the other is to really actually begin educating them with my language so that we get the gap smaller and smaller. And I've been doing that the same thing for my entire career so far with all my collaborators. It has been really effective.
That's awesome. One of the things that I think each of you comes from a different year that we did our BDSIL, which means you also had a different experience at a different venue. And in Arjun's case, he had two different venues when we did it here in Charlottesville, Virginia, but also when we did it in Seattle, Washington. And that was our intention there is to take everybody out of their usual academic environs, right? Usually try not to do it at a university because, I don't know, it's just where we spend all of our time. And that one of the ways we try to get people into more of a creative mindset is to have these at a unique location. And so we've done it at Lake Arrowhead up in the mountains in California, outside of Los Angeles. We've done it in North Carolina at this beautiful facility there. We've done it. We just did it in San Diego. We did it in Seattle. Really nice locations, which we hope bring out the creative juices, if you will, but also take us out of the usual academic environment, because it's always, I don't know, it's too easy to, oh, I'm just going to go and do this little academic chore that I have to do. Because I think some of you were commenting that getting 5 days to concentrate on something, in isolation is pretty rare. And so being able to do that, at least in a nice place where you could go have a nice walk, where there's a beautiful, view, or there's nice grounds that you can stroll around on, because we really like to take advantage of the whole property. And I guess, Arjun, you have experienced this now twice. Did you feel that that's a good use of everyone's kind of time to travel to a different location, and but to be able to use the full space available to us to help as we're developing these projects from scratch?
Oh, 100%. I mean, this is like, it's almost like this, I don't know, like idyllic vision of like this academical, the academical village that we have at UVA, but this, liberal arts education. We have all the, interplay between all the different subspecialties, but in an environment where we're interacting, socially, but also on this topic, and it may be that, two people break out and then you just go for a walk and talk about something, or, something could be outside in a, natural setting. Like I remember in both settings that I participated in, at the Boar's Head Inn at UVA, or at Charlottesville, and then at, outside of Seattle. I mean, that second setting, I think that was a converted monastery. I mean, it was this just beautiful place. And so, you'd have different groups meeting in different places and then also coming together. And, some places were a little bit more chaotic. Some places were much quieter. And you find your mix. That's what's necessary. And kind of organically, and you're not sort of fighting for space or time or whatnot. So I thought it was just really great to kind of environment to let ideas come forward, and then also work together outside of the usual place where you're going to get, like, if I show my face in the medical center, I'll get pulled by 5 different people immediately to do different things, or like, oh, just this one email, and the next thing you know, it's 20 things and whatnot. So yes, it is very important, I think, to get outside of, we call it a frog in the well. It's like an Indian proverb, live your life like a frog in the well, and the only thing you see is just the little patch of sky above you, and you think that's the world. But you got to get out of that silo and interact with other people. There's a big world out there.
Do you concur, Catherine? Does that resonate with you?
Yes, absolutely. So my year we went to an inn outside of Boston, Massachusetts, and it was just incredibly beautiful and lots of locations for walks. And I remember just sitting outside and talking about ideas, and that environment is just something we don't get in our normal university settings. And I can totally sympathize with Arjun about, when we're on campus and we want to be present on campus, but that often means that getting a dedicated time, especially 5 days for a particular project, is not typical. And so being able to just be completely extracted from that environment and go into something completely new was a huge benefit of the experience.
Yeah, we've really tried to mix up the locations. So we've done some East Coast locations, we've done some West Coast locations. We're still trying to find someplace more in the middle of the country. But when we do this in June, sometimes the middle of the country gets a little bit warm for people. But we're still looking. We will eventually kind of get there. But we've always thought that that's really important. And Susan, you benefited from our most beachy location when we did it in San Diego this year, which was really nice. We really had a good time being there. Did you feel that the venue was the right size, and that we kind of was scaled appropriately to the size of our event and that sort of thing?
I thought the venue was awesome. And coming from Texas, where in June you're often in triple digits, going to San Diego, where you might actually need to wear a jacket in the evening, was very nice. it was, I have no words to say other than it was beautiful. It got me out of my head some. And yeah, I think y'all do a great job. I do have an idea for maybe Minnesota for you. So I'll email
Okay.
Gina with the information I
You
have.
let us know.
If you want to go to because up once you get sort of north of the Twin Cities, there are some really nice places there, and it doesn't get as hot. So
Oh, fantastic. We're always receptive to ideas about possible venue locations if you know of them. Hannah, who works with us, as you'll all probably remember, Hannah, she has a running list of these things, and we search all year long for where the next venue is going to be. So if you have one, do let us know. One thing here, as we're kind of getting into the last 9 or 10 minutes here, I wanted to maybe ask you each about what advice you might give to junior faculty who are just starting their research careers, they're brand new faculty, and they're starting to build that collaborative network even more than maybe what they already have through, their relationship with their other postdoc supervisor or whatnot. Now you're on your own, you're independent, you're trying to find your own way. Does the BDSIL help you with that? What advice would you give to maybe some of your junior faculty colleagues about the value to them to take part in the BDSIL? So maybe Yang, maybe you could start. You're a good place to start.
Yeah, I was really junior when I first joined, and that was exactly my position when I joined. I think sometimes you just need somebody to kick you into the pound and then begin talking. Because I'm not the person who will take the language and be the leader in a room automatically. I try to hide in the corner. But in this particular event, I'm supposed to be a leader, like just by rotating. And I have to force myself to speak to others, and especially getting into the interdisciplinary mode, which is really important. So I think in terms of just the soft skill training, it's a great benefit. And in terms of collaborator forming, I definitely get to know quite a few people in the community that I'm still in touch with nowadays. Although we did not end up writing grants together, but we end up writing smaller papers together just because it's like for each other, we're more like consulting type. But it's a nice network.
Oh, that's fantastic. We always like to hear when people are there, even after some time, they're still working together, still communicating, and maybe they're still working on papers. Arjun, would you concur? And what advice would you give to any clinicians who might be looking to form their collaborations?
Yeah, I mean, I think if you come to this, the collaborations will definitely form. What you do with that from there, I think that's up to everyone individually. And some of the things, if you're trying to come up with a funding proposal, you either get funded or you won't, or you might get reviewed or you might not get reviewed. That's a whole other thing. And there, by the way, there's at least both years that I went, there's always like a talk, about like NIH and other sources of funding and things like that as well, which is I found very helpful. But I mean, I think as to what you do afterwards, one thing that I found really helpful was, so Heyman ended up inviting me to speak at Academic Data Science Alliance. And so I didn't know anything about this. I'm like, why am I an ophthalmologist speaking at a data science conference? But I actually found it, and I was sort of like intimidated, like, what do I have to say that they want to hear? But actually, that was one of the best things I could have done. Speaking at a conference that I normally would never engage with. It's not it's not an ophthalmology conference, glaucoma, anything like that. And ended up meeting people that I never would have. And then it turns out like, oh, actually, they needed somebody to help them with this question, or vice versa, in terms of an approach or a set of language or a set of, like, okay, it's helpful to go into a kind of an unfamiliar environment like that, because then I may not even understand what they're talking about, and it requires that translation step for me to understand like what it is that they're talking about. I mean, there was this whole concept of like causal inference, which is so alien to me coming from like a traditional biostats environment, the relationship, or training and whatnot. So And so out of that conference, that's where I deepened, the connection with Haman, but then also met some other people who became, actually friends, like Prince of Freya. He's a friend of the family now. And then that led to, mentoring, data science master's students, the capstone projects and stuff. So, yeah, I mean, I think it's just being open, and then, I think organically, and it may just be one person, but if just that one person can maintain a connection, over the years, then that's great.
Catherine?
Yes, so definitely agree with what others have said. I think going in with an open mind and being ready for whatever comes next is especially helpful. In terms of sustaining all of the connections and collaborations you make, just having some sort of intentional plan in mind, whether it's I'm going to follow up every couple of weeks with this one person that I connected with, to make sure that those things that get started at BDSIL continue. I think also for particularly junior faculty who are thinking about whether or not to apply for this opportunity, I would say absolutely do. It's one of those things that's not, I will say, at least not common. I don't know if it's the only one, but it's definitely not a common experience and not a common setup. And so doing it to sort of kickstart collaborations and learn more about the non-technical side while you're still having the scientific conversations is just an incredible opportunity. So yeah, I will stop there. I will say definitely apply if you're thinking about it.
Catherine, thank you for just kind of making the point that this is a little unusual, right? We actually pride ourselves on not being the traditional kind of summer workshop thing where you're a passive audience and you got a bunch of talking heads who come up and stand at a lectern and point at PowerPoint slides and tell you how everything should be done. This is really, we're here in service of you all and of our participants to help facilitate their interaction, their mixing, the building of these multidisciplinary teams. And so really, we think that that's a great way to help junior faculty get started on their academic journeys, right? And if you're meeting with that whole group, which people tell me they do, that's so gratifying to me. It's just like people say, oh, yeah, I'll hear from people once in a while, and they'll say, oh yeah, by the way, we wrote this article that's from our team, and it's coming out in JAMA or whatever it is. It was like, oh, I do a little happy dance, and I really do a happy dance if they tell me that they applied for grant funding and got it, whether or not it's an NIH grant or a small foundation grant or something, say, for example, through their local CTSA. Those things really get me excited because it means, okay, now that collaboration is cemented. It has got a thing on it that it could never go away because it's either a part of a peer-reviewed article or there's money now behind it to have them kind of take that on. And Susan, I think from, as somebody who's a dean in your institution, and so you have a different view than maybe a junior faculty person would, but still you probably appreciate the value of those things. Papers and grants, until we're kind of told otherwise, is kind of the coin of the realm for academic, promotion and tenure. How do these things kind of, I don't know, do these resonate in your world? About how faculty are meant to build their career and then move through promotion?
Well, absolutely it does. And we try to actually, so for our doctoral students, we make them do an IDP, an individualized development plan, and we let them know, right, once you're going down this road, you need to start submitting posters at conferences and then looking at publications. And because, like you said, it is the coin of the realm, but nobody ever learns how to do that. Like we're not born knowing how to do that, I guess is what I should say. It's not like, ooh, that's genetic and now I can run fast. No.
Yeah.
You have to learn how to do that, and how do you get better at something? You practice doing it. I always try to tell students, because sometimes they're like, oh, this is, you need to go into these types of things with a spirit of curiosity. Like, what can I pull out of this? What can I learn from other people? You may or may not wind up using it, but recently I had the opportunity to sit down and think about this, and I'm thinking about all the encounters I've had with people on a wide variety of projects over my career, and every single one of them has left an impression. And so I think that's how you have to go into it, is that it is going to leave an impression on you. You are going to learn from it, and it's going to help you in the future.
Well, leaving an impression on people and their scientific careers, their collaboration, and their approach to doing the type of science that they love is something that we really, really take pride in doing. And so this is probably a great place to stop here. We're at the top of the hour. So thank you so much for sharing your experiences and like what you remember and what you did and how it has augmented your careers and hopefully, made an impact, if you will. So Yang Chen from University of Michigan and Arjun Durganji from here at UVA and Susan Fenton from UT Health in Houston and Catherine Thompson from University of Kentucky. Thank you so much for joining us. This has been so fun to catch up with you and to hear what you're doing and to get your impressions about the BDSIL and what it meant to you. So thank you so much. Have a wonderful weekend. And everyone, thank you. Tune in again next week when we kick off some more of our Foundations of Biomedical Data Science seminar series. So thanks so much.